Dios Todopoderoso y Eterno, que gobiernas todas las cosas en el cielo y en la tierra, escucha nuestras oraciones por esta familia parroquial. Fortalece a los fieles, aviva a los indiferentes y restaura a los penitentes. Concédenos todo lo necesario para nuestra vida en común y únenos a todos en corazón y mente dentro de su santa iglesia, por Jesucristo nuestro Señor. Amén. Almighty and ever-living God, ruler of all things in heaven and earth, hear our prayers for this parish family. Strengthen the faithful, arouse the careless, and restore the penitent. Grant us all things necessary for our common life, and bring us all to be of one heart and mind within your holy church, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. I want to thank everyone for coming. I know this isn't the habit of All Saints Church to have forums during the summer, but for this week and next week, we've just decided there's cause to do this. This week, we're going to be having a forum to listen to each other and have a conversation as the task force from the vestry prepares for the vestry a draft policy on alcohol use here. And then next Sunday is our annual blessing of the backpacks, and we thought it would be a really great time to have a conversation about the state of public education in Pasadena. And so Dr. Brian McDonald, the superintendent of Pasadena Unified School District, will be here. Our own Kathy Anoye, she's devoted her life to working in public education in various aspects, mostly here in Pasadena, will be here. And we'll have a conversation about public education, what is going on, some of the great stuff that's happening in PUSD, and also how we as a church can get involved and help. I want to welcome everyone who is streaming online. Everyone turn around and wave to the camera. Good to have you all here. Never miss an opportunity to remind those of us here and those of us online that it is your generosity that helps keep All Saints flowing, as well as generous, limitless amounts of the grace of God. And so please continue to support All Saints Church with your financial gifts. And if you're watching us online, there's a little donate button that you can click on and do it from right where you are. And in fact, y'all can do that from your phone here if you want to. We are having a special forum this morning to hear from one another, as I said, as your vestry has conversations on policies about serving alcohol here at All Saints Church. And so why is the vestry having this conversation? And why are we having this conversation? So I wanted to, first of all, just fill you in on a little of the backstory. The day was November 1st. It was my first day here as rector at All Saints Church. And it was a night that ended with a vestry meeting. And our vestry meetings, which please come to, are on the first Tuesdays of the month in Sweetland Hall. They start from 6 to 7 with a dinner, and then the meeting starts at 7. And I noticed that we were serving wine both at the dinner and at the meeting. And one of my favorite questions is, what do you notice? And I noticed this. And it raised some questions for me. And it raised some questions of health and hospitality and liability. This is a gathering where decisions were being made for the life of the church, and the question it raised as well, is serving alcohol here conducive to that process, and is it the best thing for community health? And I noticed also that there were minors in the room. We have youth delegates on vestry, and there were possibly people in recovery in the room. And was this hospitable, or was this divisive, or maybe somewhere in between? And then finally, issues of liability. This was brought to the forefront in the Episcopal Church in the last couple years. Many of you may know the suffragan Bishop of Maryland, Heather Cook, got drunk and drove and killed a cyclist, and Heather Cook is now in prison. And so it's issues, first of all, of moral liability. And then second, issues of legal liability. And so I raised the issue, and I asked whether we had a policy. And the very asking of that question apparently began rumors that I was riding into town and declaring prohibition. And I have not, and I am not. The vestry is the policy-making body of the congregation. I do, however, want us to be in thoughtful, prayerful, and intentional about our relationship with addictive substances such as alcohol because, well, for one reason, is addiction is something that touches all of our lives. Statistically, probably everyone in this room, if not just about everyone in this room, either struggles with addiction or has a close family member or friend who struggles with addiction. This is just a deeply human issue. Now, we look at our scripture, and Jesus says that he came that we might have life and have it in abundance. And addiction is a thief of abundance. Addiction imprisons and kills us, and so it's something that's worth talking about. And so that's what we're doing. And so I'm deeply grateful to Liza Billington for agreeing to convene and chair the vestry task force on alcohol policy. And some of the members of that task force are here this morning to listen to you. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to listen to each other about what we think about alcohol use at All Saints Church and what we think our policy should be. I'm just going to open it up. And before I open it up, I'm going to say just a few more words about the conversation, and some of them are already up here on the screen. First is that any conversation about alcohol touches our stories. And our stories are holy ground, and our stories are powerful and emotional. What that means is this conversation may touch something in you, and you may start to feel something. And so if this topic touches a place of sadness or anger or fear or any other emotion, that is human and that is natural. If that happens, it can be helpful to ask yourself in that situation, why? Where is this emotion coming from? Might be a good chance to learn about ourselves. Some of us have very painful memories and histories personally and with family around alcohol and addiction, and so this really, it touches us in a powerful way. And so that's also a reminder that as we listen to each other, to really hold ourselves and hold each other with love and grace. Because we may not even be aware of our own history with this, and we also don't necessarily know each other's history with this. The second thing is, the church has a pretty uneven and frankly often destructive history with conversations like this that can touch other ways that we've experienced church. So the church as a whole throughout history has often responded to the topic of alcohol with fundamentalism. And it's the same fundamentalism that often deeply wounded us in other forms, and from which, frankly, many have fled other churches to come to All Saints. And so the very fact that we are having this conversation, maybe it's causing you a little anxiety about whether there's creeping fundamentalism at All Saints Church, and whether this will remain a safe place in lots and lots of ways. And so that's why I want to reemphasize that this conversation is going to be about three things. First is about health. About personal health, about communal health, and about what we are modeling to the world. What does it mean? I believe God desires health for us. And so what does it mean for us to be healthy as an individual? What does it mean for us to be healthy as a community? What does it mean for us to model health for the world? Health is different than rights. It's a different conversation. St. Paul said, all things might be lawful, but not all things are helpful. Just because I have the right to do something doesn't mean it's the best thing for me or for the community. So we want to talk about health. Second thing is we want to talk about hospitality. And alcohol can cut both ways with that. There are ways that we have experienced that as an expression of hospitality and welcoming, giving someone a drink. And then it also can be divisive and exclusionary. So we want to say, what's that experience in this community? And finally, liability. And liability is first and foremost moral liability. It would be an absolute awful, awful thing if something happened here that resulted in the death or injury of another human being. And then there's also very real legal consequences to liability, and so we need to talk about that. A few simple ground rules. Please try to use, in fact, please use I statements. Avoid phrases like lots of people are saying or lots of people think. Just speak for yourself. I'm going to try to hold everyone to 90 seconds talking so we can get as many people as possible in. I'm going to point to people to speak, so lobbying the people who are holding the microphones won't do you a bit of good. And also let me say about that is, even though a couple people have come up to me on a Sunday morning and given opinions about this, and I've heard them in general, like with many things that people say to me on Sunday mornings, at the end of Sunday morning, I can't remember who said what. So I'm looking out here, and I don't know what any of your opinions on this are. So it's going to be impossible for me to sort of stack any side of this, because I really don't know. Also, you were in front of you and on your chairs, there's a note card when you came in. And if you have something to say and you don't get a chance to speak, please write it down. And we'll collect those at the end, and those will be given to the task force. And so your input will be heard that way. So everyone will get a chance to be heard. And finally, the most important thing is, if you're not the one speaking, you have one job. And it's not to be planning what you're going to say. If you're not the one speaking, your job is to listen deeply and to consider what the other person is saying, particularly if that point of view is different from and challenging to yours. Okay? So are we ready? I'm really interested in hearing from you all. Your committee's interested in hearing from you all. Who are the folks with the microphones? We've got them right here. Let's just go ahead and start off here in front, David. And stand up, say your name, and okay. Just what do you have to say about alcohol, health, hospitality, and liability?
Hi, my name is David Vossler, and I think we should institute a simple policy that is, if you're going to have alcohol at an event, it should be done just like for communion, done in a ritualistic way, such that there's a small portion given out in remembrance, and for our brothers and sisters who have an alcoholic problem, that they also be given grape juice. It not be like you're at a bar and people continue to refill and come out with multiple, but just a small amount in a communal setting. And if children are there, the organizer of the particular event make sure that they are offered just the grape juice, and then the wine is put away and not left out.
Thank you, David. Who else? Around. Go ahead. Over here.
Hi, I'm Karen Smith, and I'm part of the lay counseling ministry here. And I believe that alcohol at a business meeting is way out of line. So when the vestry is there meeting, they're there to do the business of the church, and they need clear heads to do that. If it's a party like at the end in June, lay counseling had our end of the year celebration and to say goodbye to each other for the summer. Yes, we had some wine. That was a different situation. But when we're here to do the business, we need clear heads.
So you would draw a distinction between business and social?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Jim over here.
Hand up, Jim.
So this is more procedural. I'm Jim Albarano, treasurer. I appreciate the cards. For the streamers, is there a way for them to, if they have comments, I'm sure there's people watching at home right now that might have comments. Can they
I was thinking of giving out Liza's home phone number, but that's probably about, no. No. I would say info@allsaintspass.org. If you have something you want to say, send it to that, and should talk to you all who are streaming. And then in the subject line, put alcohol policy feedback. Thanks, Jim. Anything over here?
I'm Jim White, and this really is not as much a comment as it is a question. I know there's attorneys in the room. Mm-hmm. Can we hear what the liability issues are?
Okay, my hunch is wherever there are more than one attorney, there are multiple views on that. And I know that because I've heard multiple views on that. That's a good point of information. Are there attorneys who would speak to that? Would you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Bob Wilson. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I specialize in driving under the influence defense. But when we started having the discussion on the committee, I contacted some lawyer friends of mine who sue people. Like maybe at one of these events where somebody drives home drunk, kills somebody, and they come after the church. Here's the law currently. We don't have any liability. The law is focused right now on the drinker, not the server. Unless we serve somebody that's obviously intoxicated, we don't have any liability. It's that simple. I agree with Mike, and I hadn't heard it before. We have a moral liability, but we don't have any. We don't really have a legal liability here.
Thank you. Terry? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Terry.
Good morning. I'm Terry Moore. I have members of my family who believe that drinking alcohol is a sin. In fact, my sister-in-law, when she came to church with us, said afterwards, I prayed forgiveness all the way back to my pew after I had that wine at communion. But Jesus' first miracle was to change water into wine, and I believe that he liked to celebrate. I don't think that drinking is a sin. I totally agree that if it's some kind of business meeting where we're trying to do something for the whole church, that it should be restricted. But when we're having our upcoming celebration of leaders at the church, I would hope that we could have wine available as well as many other kinds of drink for people who would like to have them.
Right. Thank you, Terry. Over here.
I'm Carolyn, and I just have 2 points.
Are you able to stand? Thank you.
One is I like the focus on this as an issue of health. And one thing that I would say is I don't think that necessarily means that alcohol is always bad. But if alcohol is served in community, then there is a responsibility if there becomes an awareness that someone is struggling with that for the community to then use that information to approach them in love in a way that might actually facilitate their health and recovery. And the second thing I wanted to say is just in terms of dealing with the difference between what is right versus what is good, I want to point out that pot becomes legal on January 1st. So that's another thing to think about.
Well, no, and that's part of, and thank you, and we do need to think about this in terms of alcohol and other addictive substances. One of the things I like to point out is one of the most addictive substances that we have right now is this. So what are we doing with that? Thank you. Here.
All right.
And then Steve.
Microphone speakers, let's keep that mic about 2 inches from your mouth. It's the best that way.
Hi, I'm Jane Wallace. I guess I don't know what 2 inches is. Anyway, I'm a woman in recovery, and I am perfectly comfortable being around other people who are drinking. And I know that I'm involved in a community here at All Saints, and when we have our meetings, there's wine, and everyone drinks responsibility, and my hat's off is off to people who can drink responsibly. I like what the woman up here said, where if you identify someone with a problem, the community should work to address that issue. But I, for one, as a woman in recovery, think celebratory wine is fine, and I'm comfortable with it. So, that's right.
Thank you. Steve?
I'm Steve Galton. I'm a former member of the vestry, and I remember the vestry meetings, they served wine, but they also had water, they also had coffee, they also had other alternatives to the wine. Nobody forced you to drink wine, and I thought it added something to the meeting. It was social, it was pleasant, and people, I think, felt that it was a positive rather than a negative part of the church culture. And my question to you is, what was the policy at your former parish in St. Louis? And secondly, has there been any incident or problem that has precipitated your bringing this to the vestry to change our culture?
I will answer those questions briefly. The second one is easy. No. Literally, what happened was what I described. I noticed this at a vestry meeting, and so I asked some questions. Part of this comes from my experience at Christ Church Cathedral in St. Louis, and that was, we were the cathedral of the diocese. There, the diocese has an alcohol policy. The Diocese of Los Angeles really doesn't. Nothing that's been significantly observed at all here in the last several decades. And as the cathedral of the diocese, we were pretty well bound to observe the diocesan policy. And the diocesan policy was that alcohol was not to be served at meetings where business was taking place. The rationale for that being is we did want people's minds cleared when they were making decisions for the life of the church. At other events, with the permission of the dean, rector, or priest in charge, beer or wine could be served, nothing stronger than that, but non-alcoholic alternatives had to be offered and equally as attractively presented. So you couldn't just have beer, wine, and a bucket of water with a ladle in it. So that remains the policy in the Episcopal Diocese of Missouri, and as far as I know, at Christ Church Cathedral. Thank you. Here, and then back there, and then there. Please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hi, my name's Mary, and through the grace of God, I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for 25 years.
Congratulations.
I have been touched at the policy change in having grape juice at the communion. I hadn't been able to take communion in 25 years, and the first time I took that sip, I cried. And the second time I took the sip of grape juice, I cried, and today I cried as well. Like the woman that's spoken before, at social events, I have no problem with other people drinking wine. This is an issue between me and God. I will say that me becoming sober was an issue between me and God, and nobody could suggest or tell me that I could become sober. And I think that if anybody wants to approach anybody in the community about their drinking, that they should visit or could visit an Al-Anon meeting. I only speak for myself, and the wonderful thing is we have an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting here on campus once a week, which I think is just lovely. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We had over here, and then Jenny, and then Grace.
Good morning, Kathy Wilson. I have two quick things. The first one is I have attended church events over the last several years where there are folks who leave appearing to have a blood alcohol higher than one with which they should be driving home. So that we've seen. The second one is that
you've seen that personally.
But that's just to say
Okay.
I don't have a breathalyzer in my pocket.
Right.
The second is that when I was new to All Saints and listened to Ed Bacon telling us how deeply to dig to make our first pledge, Bob and I did that. I was so taken by this being a social justice church. And when I first attended events where I realized that part of that budget went to purchase alcohol, I must say I was really taken aback by that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have
Jenny, are you on?
Jenny, and then I want Grace, and then Lindy.
Hi, I'm Jenny. Oh, and I don't have to hold it that close. I've taken in what so many of you have said, and there are so many times where I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling for every single person, and I'm sure that might be many of you in the room right now. I have a different addiction. Mine is food. And so I can listen to it from so many different angles, except for the legal one, because I'm not going to hopefully hurt anybody by my personal addiction. Right. But I found that this place, for me, it's hard with my own addiction here because there's so many unhealthy choices. It's constant donuts and cake on the lawn and everything. And I have to turn to it and say, that's not for me. That's not my food. And I am sure that people who are who have an alcohol addiction probably have to say the same thing. But I don't know if everybody's at that point where they can say that in their recovery. And the other thing is just, I don't know how much somebody can drink and be okay and somebody not be okay. And so that is a little bit, it can be scary. And I also understand the fundamental part of it coming from the fundamental church, where it's like you're a sinner if you do this. So there's so much in here, and I'm so grateful that all of you are sharing it. It's just really great to learn from all of you.
Thank you. Grace and then Lindy.
Well, I'm just sort of piggybacking on what you just said. I came to this church because of the freedom in this church, that you could bring children here to each other, that we are responsible to each other, and that's a very important message to me. I grew up in an evangelical home that was very rigid, and so I couldn't go to movies, I couldn't dance, and I had to sneak to have the kind of fun that was in me that needed to come out. I totally agree with our first speaker, Karen. I think business is business. I think we need to be sharp. I think we need to be focused. I think celebratory stuff, Jesus modeled for us. And if we see a person next to us that might need a ride home, we're mature people. We can take care of each other.
Thank you. Lindy.
Hi, I'm Lindy Scott, and I happen to love wine. I really do appreciate what I've been hearing here as well. I can relate to a lot of it. My feeling is this. I believe that every one of us are responsible adults. I believe wine and alcohol is an adult, sophisticated drink. I think that I've seen very responsible people. I see nothing wrong with celebratory wine and beer on campus. I've been, in parties where we've had that, and everybody is just very responsible. It's just a drink of choice. And like I said, I think it's very adult. I think everyone takes care of everyone here, as you said. I believe as well, I understand about meetings because, yeah, it can get to your head if you're enjoying it too much. But I really like that we have celebratory adult drinks here. And I also appreciate that we have other drinks available. But I don't feel that there's been a problem. I don't feel that there's anything wrong with it. And I really, from what I've even been hearing in this room, I think there are many, many people that can say to themselves, yes, I'm going to, no, I'm not, no, I better not. I just really believe that. And I happen to miss it at some of our celebrations here.
Thank you, Lindy. Over here and then down here. So Sally over here, and then down here, and then, yeah.
Thank you. It's my turn. Okay.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Good morning. I'm Jean Shamim, and wanted to find out what are the statistics telling us that one symbolic sip of wine makes a difference to the health and well-being of an alcoholic person, or through the centuries we have kept up this tradition because I have attended churches and have taken communion in many places of worship around the globe. And I am not a person that drinks, and just one sip of symbolic wine, does it matter? And are there any statistics telling us something? And we do have a choice to touch the chalice and not partake. That's my thoughts.
Is there anyone who can speak to Janine's question? Over here, just really quick, and then we'll get the microphone back to you, and then to you.
Hi, I'm Mary. I can only say my experience is that at the rail, when I would try to touch the chalice, it would come very close to my nose, and the scent would make me very sad and very anxious.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead and you wanted to respond to Janine's question?
Yes. Hi, I'm Molly, and I also am in recovery. I have 22 years clean and sober.
Thank you, Molly.
And I have the experience with communion. I've always gone and knelt, and I learned at another church that I went to that if you just do this symbol like this, you don't have, I've never had that experience with the wine being so close that it affects me, but everybody's different.
Everyone's different.
But I choose not to take even one sip because that would trigger me. So I think that's in general what Alcoholics in Recovery we don't take even one sip. It's just, we just stay away. At least for me and
Right.
my friends
And-
in
yeah.
recovery.
And everyone's, I heard you also say everyone's different. Great. Over here. And then, no, then you're fine.
I'm Sparky Jameson, and I have 3 quick thoughts. One is when I was new to the Episcopal Church, one of the first things I attended was a funeral. And I remember walking into the reception at the funeral, and my friend was there. Her husband had died, and she greeted me at the door with a glass of wine. And I thought, wow, this is really kind of a nice way to celebrate Jack. And it felt different from other churches I had been at, where we actually could have a celebratory reception for him. The other thought is, as a compromise, it might be that at the vestry meetings you could serve wine at the dinner and then pull it, when it's time for the meeting, and not continue serving it during the meeting. That's a compromise thought, but I tend to think that it's probably best not to have it at the vestry meetings. And the other thing is almost a question. I have a hunch it might take a little bit of doing to avail yourselves of the grapefruit, the grape juice at communion, and I don't know. Is it a little inconvenient, or does it work pretty well? Are there plenty of stations for the grape juice? That would be a question I have, because I think that's really important.
Right. As it stands right now, to get grape juice, you go to the sides, the same thing as gluten-free. And does this seem to be working pretty? Do you want to sort of? Okay. And so what I would say, if you have suggestions on how we can do this better, please come either talk to me or Melissa Hayes, who's our Director of Liturgy. So thanks. And then we were here first.
Oh.
You're up, and then
thank you.
back there.
All right, I'm Georgia.
Hi, Georgia.
And I want to say, first of all, that as a Midwesterner, always, although I've been in California now for over 35 years, 40 maybe, that I really support the Episcopal Diocese of Missouri's policy that you explained. That makes a lot of common sense to me, and I think it's a wonderful ideal for us to practice. And I'm also speaking from having been raised in the Methodist Church, where Wonder Bread and grape juice 4 times a year was our communion. So when I first joined St. Augustine's Episcopal Church in Santa Monica and had wine at communion, that was pretty exciting and exotic, right? But I limit my alcohol to Prosecco and Champagne. But I want to say that I actually came here because I thought this meeting was going to be about establishing a ministry that dealt with addiction. Addiction in the broadest possible sense, and how addiction is related to mental health issues. So I thought this was, and I hope that we do have that discussion at a certain point, because there's a wonderful book called Grace and Addiction that is just, I think, in its own way, a holy book. And I hope this discussion leads to greater discussions about how we can serve our community.
That would be great.
All right.
Thank you. And I'll pause there. Bud or Sally, do you want to say anything about recovery ministries at All Saints Church?
I applaud that is coming from you and not from me.
And say who you are.
I'm Bud Williams, and I'm also an alcoholic with 32 years of sobriety. And I do take the wine, and for me it's the blood of Christ. It's not the wine. So it is different for everybody. But we do have a recovery Eucharist on Tuesday nights at 6:30 in the chapel. We've had it for probably about 30 years every week. So that's helpful. But it just scratches the surface in terms of what we could do here. Addiction, as you know, with painkillers and with food and sex and porn and alcohol and all of it, it goes on and on and on. So I think it's a great idea to go deeper with a stronger ministry.
Yeah. Sally, anything you want to add from pastoral care, health, and healing? Healing and health.
I would agree that I think we're just beginning in some ways to look at health in a broader way in the community and thinking about healthy relationships to all substances and cell phones, as you said, Mike, and I think is a wonderful idea. And I want to talk with you after the forum.
Right. I think over here, down here, Sally, down here. It's actually, I'm pointing down here, and then we'll get over there. No, right here. She's next to Lindy. There you go. Yes.
I'm Joan Mitchell, and I'm very active and have been for many years in the Altar Guild and addressing the subject of the availability of the grape juice. Besides the 2 stations on both sides, we are putting the decanter of consecrated grape juice on the credence table, and there is always an extra chalice there. So if you could have that available to anyone who came to the communion rail across the front. And also my feeling about not having it at business meetings, but it seems to me in celebratory occasions, perhaps the person for whom the occasion is being held, if it was their wish not to have alcohol there, that they should be consulted. But for those of us who feel it's a celebratory thing, particularly in the memorials, the celebration of life, we didn't used to do that. It was a funeral. And our first experience with that was with a friend, well, he was a gentleman my husband worked with, and when they were Jewish. And we went to the service, and after the service, Jack had a party at his house, and we just, isn't this wonderful? You know, we're celebrating somebody's life instead of feeling very sad.
So you would let those people decide?
Yes.
Okay.
The person it was being celebrated for.
And I will say that's actually what happened in our last 2 major celebrations with James Walker and Zelda Kennedy. We went to them and said, would you like alcohol, beer, or wine served here? They both said no, and so we didn't do it, but it was up to them. So we got a few minutes left. Who else would like to talk? We may not be able to get everybody in. Over here and over here. Was there someone over? Oh, yeah, there. Okay. And then, did you have? Yes, right there.
I'm Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Congratulations to all of you in recovery, and congratulations to those of you who keep trying. I have lived with active alcoholism for more than 10 years, and now we're in sobriety. It's been about another 10 years, thanks to God, thanks to Al-Anon, thanks to AA. To me, I like my wine. I think it's a matter of hospitality. I don't believe I have ever seen anybody, now maybe I'm just in the wrong place, overdo it here at church, because I think maybe we're just a little bit stingy with it. But I think that's probably, I think that's probably a good idea. At my former parish, like 30 years ago at St. John's in Los Angeles, I was stunned when there were people who were totally outraged and disgusted that we had wine at all. I don't know if there are people here that feel that way, but I want to be sensitive to them too.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Over here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeanette Miyamoto, former vestry member and former chair of a couple of different ministries at All Saints Church. And I just want to tell you my story because I feel that I feel a little guilty right now. Because as a leader of the End New Jim Crow task group, I was the one who brought a bottle of wine to the meetings every month, or actually we used to meet twice a month. Also, on the other hand, when I went to my first vestry meeting, I have to say that I was also surprised that wine was being served. And I thought, what does this mean? Well, I suppose it is the hospitality piece that's joining the social aspect with the business aspect. And I had a thought of, but I accepted it, and this is how I interpreted it, rightly or wrongly. For me, it was, okay, we are here and we are trusted to use our best judgment at all times to use our best judgment about whether or how much we drink. And so that's how I understood it. That is at our best judgment. And in this conversation, what I love is that there are so many different perspectives being expressed. And how we navigate that as an organization, I think is going to be very interesting. Mm-hmm. A couple of things, though, that I think I would like to raise up.
Just briefly. So
okay,
yeah.
Is the issue of power,
Mm-hmm.
connected to Antonio's sermon today. Who makes this decision for all of us,
Mm-hmm.
number one. And number two, it's about how our autonomy is affected. So I think I'm responding to that like, ooh, this may take away. It's not a health issue, it's a power issue.
Right.
Okay,
I'm going to actually just, and because I want to also just very briefly address your question, because it's a very simple question. Who makes this decision? The vestry makes this decision. The vestry, you elect the vestry, and the vestry has several responsibilities. They have responsibility for fiduciary oversight of the congregation. They are the policy-making body of the congregation, and they share with the rector, clergy, and other staff in the spiritual leadership of the congregation. So the vestry, as your elected representatives, makes this decision on behalf of the community because you have elected them to do that. This is why we have a vestry task force who will make a proposal to the vestry that will be discussed and voted on by them. Others, I'm gonna let someone else. We have time for one more. Anyone? Right? Actually, someone who hasn't spoken yet. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet. Go right here, right next to you. Yeah, go ahead.
Pamela.
Yeah, there you go.
Pamela, good morning, everyone.
Hey, Pamela.
I love Jeanette's, how she prefaced that, the power portion of it. I really appreciate that. And mine is in terms of, do we get to lobby the vestry? Because I have a very strong point of view in how I want it to unfold. Are we able to speak to them, encourage them, give our points of view? Are they acting up on their own? Or are they taking in our counsel when they make the decision?
I can answer that question really easily. First of all, you have vestry members here and members of the task force who are listening right now, who will get the information on your cards. The names of the vestry members are public, and you're welcome to come to vestry meetings. We encourage visitors to come to vestry meetings. We actually have a time at the beginning and the end of vestry meetings for visitor comment. Vestry members are elected by you, and I would hope that they would love to hear your thoughts. I would just ask that, as with everyone else, the conversation is loving and respectful. But please give your opinions to your vestry members, because that will help them do their job. And again, this is a reminder, as one of our vestry members, Andy, said, they have name tags. Vestry members have name tags that identify them as vestry members. We're going to be looking at other ways that we can make sure everyone knows who their vestry members are. And our senior warden would like to say a few words.
Yes, thank you for your participation today. And we have just designated a mailbox in the office in the main lobby for vestry. So you can not only write us about this, but you can write us about anything that you want to tell us. And of course, I encourage you to always attend our meetings.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm going to ask us to just take a moment before we finish, and actually as a way of finishing, invite you to close your eyes and think about the different voices that we have heard. Think about a voice that resonated with you. Think about a voice that was challenging or difficult for you to hear. Consider the courage it took for people to stand up and speak. Give thanks for the holiness of the life stories that were shared. And pray that God's Spirit of love and wisdom may guide us all. Amen. Thank you all very much.